Okay, Nancy, this is my tutorial for how to make how to frame a cross stitch. So there's a couple things you're going to need. You're going to need this press-on board, which you can buy in lots of different sizes. Sometimes I get it in the 5x7, sometimes I get it in 8x11, I think it is. Anyway, you can buy it on Amazon, and it just has this adhesive on the back. And so the first thing I usually do is I cut this piece to the size that I want. So that's going to depend on the frame you're using or what you're doing with it. So for me, I'm making some more of these little 5x5 replaceable swap outs for my little thing I made. So these are not technically going to be framed, but you're using the same process. This is the same thing you'll do if you frame it or whatever you're going to do with it. If you want it on a backing like this. And it's super easy to frame once you get on a backing. So I'm going to do that with this next one, this Halloween one. So I've got my piece of board already cut, and then I'm going to use this cotton batting and sheets. I buy it in the sheet, like a roll. It's just very thin. And then that's the first thing I'm going to do when I put it on here. I don't even really cut it out first. I just peel off the backing because I already know this is the right size. This is 5x5. So I peel it off and I put, there's some little bits there, and I just make sure it's flat and I put it right on here, stick it to the sticky side. So I've got that mat or batting on the sticky side, and I'm going to cut it out. Just find it easier to cut it out after you stick it on. You just have a little bit of extra you'll have to throw away, but it's not a big deal. This comes in a huge sheet that I think you can get in smaller amounts, but it's like a whole roll. So I have tons of it. Okay. So once you've got that done, then you're going to actually put your cross stitch piece on. Now typically I'll like iron this because you can see it's been in the hoop, but this is the tricky part, is kind of centering it where you want it on the backing. So sometimes I'll flip it over and kind of eye it. Sometimes I'll actually measure it out and draw it. For this one I'm just going to eye it because I think because it goes all the way to the edge. This one will not have a frame or a mat. But if you do have a frame or a mat, I can kind of show you how I do those, but you're just going to do a lot of measuring. But no matter what, you're going to have to put it on the backing like this first. So for this one, I'm going to kind of make sure I've got the right space, because there's really no space on the edges for this one. So I want to make sure I don't put any of the stitching over the edge. So it's pretty close. So now I just cut off some of these edges. So this is still the back. The fuzzy, you know, the cotton's going to be facing the back of it, of the stitch. So I'm going to cut off, just so there's not a lot of bulky fabric, about 1 inch, I guess, on the edges. Sometimes I cut off too much and then you have problems framing it, so make sure you leave a little bit. 1 inch seems to be a good amount, as long as you've measured everything correctly. That's where I get in trouble. If I didn't measure things correctly and you know, with the mat, especially if I'm putting a mat and a frame, then I can sometimes cut too much, but you want to make sure you don't cut too much. And then this part is where I take this tape. This is just a double-sided tape, and I think it's called cross stitch tape or something. I buy it on Amazon too, I think. And so there's a sticky back to it, or a non-sticky, but you'll peel that off. So I take it and I just do all the edges. I just stick it on and cut. Sometimes I'll be fancy and cut it at an angle, but I'm not going to do that this time. Doesn't really matter. So I get all this on. You don't want to really overlap this because you have to peel the backing off, so I try to only get just what I need there. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want to get most of those covered because you're really going to be pulling this fabric and pushing it down when you tape it, when you put it down. So you do want most of the space covered. You don't want to leave a lot of blank spots. So then I peel the backing off, if I can get it off here. It's being stinky. And the corners can be the trickiest part, but I just kind of work them until they look good. So for this particular one, I've done a bunch of these. There's like a different one for each holiday. You know, I've got this 4th of July one. So I've kind of got it down how I do my corners, and then I actually hot glue these. You could do that for a framed one too. I've never done it on a framed one, but because these ones don't have a mat or a frame, I need the corners to be super tight. When you're framing it, you're not going to see those corners usually. So I don't necessarily worry about hot gluing it. But you could. I might try it next time I frame one. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so then I peel these all off. Ooh. One more here. Oh my gosh, it will not come off. Okay. So then, you know, because it's this sticky tape, it's not the end of the world if it's not perfect. You can move it. So I usually do opposite sides. Like I would do these two sides or these two sides first. So let's try these two. And because this one's so right to the edge, I'm just going to kind of do a tiny bit. See how that looks. And I just keep flipping it over to see. Oh, see how I'm off there? So I'm going to do a little bit more this way. It doesn't look right, so maybe I'll just look from the front. I'll get that just so. I need to move it over a little. There we go. I think I'm going to do side to side first here. Okay, so this one's small enough that I could just do it from the front. But you do want to pull it tight enough, you know, because you don't want wrinkles or bumps here. And so that's kind of the point of that cotton backing too, is to help it lay really nicely and look good. So I have to actually move it down a little bit. So I got the sides correct, but I need to move it down a tiny bit. So I'm gonna just kind of try and do that. Or up, I mean, sorry. I need to move it up. Okay. So, you know, it'll take me some time, but once I get it, it looks really good. I'm happy with it. Then I can kind of, you know, do little adjustments. I can pull a little bit more here, or but I like that this tape is pretty forgiving. You can kind of pull it off and redo it if it's not perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect anyway, so. Okay, this looks pretty good, so I'm happy with that. So now I'm gonna really pull it tight. So sometimes I'll pull it up again and just really make sure I've got it pulled tight so that I don't have any bumps or lines or anything. Okay, it's looking good. So for this particular one, because I'm doing I have to mount it. There's not gonna be anything around it, and it's gonna have the magnets. I'm gonna do the corners really carefully. So at this point is where I do like the hot glue. I like to kind of push the corners down like this and then hot glue them. So I'll do that next, but I won't show you that part. But it can be, you kind of have to pull it and hold it if you want those corners really tight. But you'll see how when it's all done, it will look nice and tight. Look nice and good. So that's kind of the first step. I know it can be a little trickier with a mat, just because you kind of have to measure where you want it. And I've found that sometimes I can't find a mat that's the right size, and so I have to kind of cut one of my own, and that's probably the hardest part, is cutting a mat. So if you can find one that fits, that's the best, or just not use one at all, that's good too. Like this one. Ooh, I'll show you right here. Like these ones don't have a mat. Oh, that one has a little mat. That one doesn't have any mat. Those ones don't have a mat. But these ones, it looks like I cut this one myself, maybe both of these. And they don't look terrible, but they're not great. If you look real close, they're not great, but they're okay. But you know, I did the same process where I took this is on a mat, a sticky mat. I put the batting, and then I put it, you know, I did the same thing I just did. And then I just frame it, you know. So it's just like you've got a nice stiff board to put on in the frame, and it's easier to do that way. So anyway, okay. Any other questions you can ask me? I'll share whatever. Hopefully that's helpful. Oh, actually, I guess when I am framing them though, actually I do put tape, like I tape the edges down if I'm not doing hot glue. But I'm not gonna do that for this one because of what I'm using it for. But I do use, this is just a artist tape or a craft tape, and instead of hot gluing, I'll just tape everything so that those corners stay down. So that's kind of the difference. You can either hot glue or you can tape, and it works fine. Okay, bye.